Afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Gira Patel. I'm one of the partners at Campbell, Tickell, and I am going to be your host, as it were, this afternoon. Really good to have you all here. You're all very welcome. Nice to see so many people. Lots of familiar faces, so that's really great. We're here, as you know, to talk about reimagining work. It's an area that we've all been contending with over the last couple of months, and we hope that this forum will be a useful place for you to hear some ideas, hopefully to be inspired, and to come together and hear from some people who have already been doing some thinking and taking some action about reimagining work. We've got three really fantastic speakers for you today. Before we get going though, just a couple of practicalities. So first of all, we're going to be recording this webinar and we're going to make that available soon after the event, so look out for that. Please can you use the Q&A function today. We will obviously be monitoring that as we go. If you like, you can upvote somebody else's question, so that helps us to see which are the popular questions, and feel free to comment on other people's questions as well. We're asking participants to stay on mute. There's no video function for attendees, but hopefully you can see all of us on the panel. Don't worry if the tech fails for one person. There's plenty of us around to kind of keep the conversation going. And then just to confirm the format, we've got 3 speaker sessions. Each speaker is going to talk for around 10 minutes. I'll be keeping an eye on time. We've then got 5-minute breaks in between our 3 speakers, and then we've got about 15 minutes or so at the end for a broader Q&A panel. We'll do our very best to answer as many of your questions as we can in the time that we've got available. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and as part of their introduction, I've asked them to tell us what's the one thing that they do now in terms of the way that they work that they absolutely would not have imagined 10 years ago. So, Kevin.
Thanks, Jeff, and welcome to everybody. So my name's Kevin Ives. I'm the CIO at Sovereign Housing Association. I also, at the moment, am interim head of people. So hopefully the 2 components of technology and people may play out quite well in this conversation today. So 10 years ago, I still have a son. 10 years ago, my son was 1. He's now strangely 11, and I call on him to do my desktop engineer service at home, fixing things like Bluetooth mice, sort of double screens and stuff like that. Is my go-to person for that stuff, which is quite weird, really. I think there's an extended theme in there, I think, around how technology and digital has moved on in that time, and the last 6 months have just exploded that. So to think now that we're recruiting remotely through Zoom or Teams, to think that we're collaborating in this fashion, whereas the kind of projects I was looking 10 years ago, the kind of projects that we were working on were deployment of mobile devices and how we kind of educate the front line to use mobile devices, where we were just light years ahead from there. So, you know, 10 years feels like a short time, but it's sometimes a useful time frame to just to sort of reflect back and then think about where we could be in 10 years time. Exciting prospects.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Kevin. Reassuring for us as well that the CIO has to ask teenagers and children to help him with his tech, so that's great. Tracey, can I come to you next?
Hello, I'm Tracey McEachran. I am the Director of Curious Minds Consulting, and we work with people on behaviour change, so anything around leadership. And I'm also a Senior Associate for Campbell Tickell. So what do I do now that wasn't doing 10 years ago? I'm really going to swing the pendulum here, Kevin, and take it the opposite way to low tech. And 10 years ago, I might have been in a classroom or a forum where I could use my body to conduct conversation, so get people to stop talking and move the conversation to somewhere else. So I found a very polite way of timing people and giving people airtime in virtual space and calling them to time, and that's this.
Fantastic. Hopefully you won't have recourse to use that this afternoon, but I may call upon you. Thank you, Tracey. And then Yvonne.
Hi, yes, thank you very much, Kira. So I'm Yvonne, I'm Chief Exec of Johnnie Johnson Housing. And 10 years ago actually seems like an age to me, I have to say, even though time is flying. So what I didn't think I'd be doing now is I don't think I'd not see a sunrise or a sunset on my commute to work. I'm a very early bird, and so I know the sunrise and sunset very well on the M62 and the M60. So I think that's the one thing for me.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Welcome to our speakers. And without further ado, we're going to get going. And our first speaker is Kevin. Kevin, over to you.
Thanks very much. So I guess I just wanted to spend a little bit of time unwrapping the concept of how technology plays into flexibility, which I think is two components of reimagining work going forward. I'd like to start on the flexibility side rather than the technology side, which may feel a kind of antithesis of a CIO, but I feel very, very strongly that that the challenge going forward is as much of an organizational one as it is a technology one. It feels to me like there's a lot of voice at the moment around location flexibility. So do we return to the office? When do we return to the office? When we return to the office, will we act in the same way that we acted before? You know, it's that kind of dimension. And then there's discussions around, well, what technology do we need to support that? I actually think there's a much broader set of considerations around flexibility and what next. So it's not just location flexibility. I think our time in lockdown has thrown up a number of other interesting challenges, one being hours worked. So, you know, the sunrise point of Yvonne, we are naturally working differently now. Now, some of that is born out of our personal circumstance, be it homeschooling or caring or whatever. Some of it is born out of different business imperatives. But there's been a focus on, you know, maybe what we expected as a 9-to-5 role doesn't always really fit, and actually sometimes flexing that a bit one way or a bit another way can be good, can work through some positives. It also throws up some challenges as well. So some questions on technology there as well. I think team flexibility has been a really interesting one for me through this period. So you know, the kind of traditional reliance on water cooler chats to get stuff done, for that suddenly just to be removed requires some imagination, really, as to how that water cooler chat, informal exchange of ideas can be supplemented, replaced, enhanced. Now technology has a role to play in that, but also it's some behaviours and some sort of skills required to unlock that. And there's others too. I think contract flexibility is an interesting one as well. Many of us have sort of worked on flex in terms of sort of school holiday contracts or you know, being able to have extended leave in periods. But I think that comes to the fore more and more as we look to sort of open up and really understand how we can engage in people's how and where and when people want to work, and that may require a different sort of lens to look at how we contract away from 40 hours a week, 9 to 5. So I mean, they're weighty issues. They're not things that can be fixed easily. If you look at any one of those, they require, or in kind of old money, would have required significant organisational design activity, would have required looking at roles, looking at how roles are designed, looking at the cultural impacts that overlay on those. Now, add them all together and look at the kind of changing external landscape and uncertainties on second wave or you know, where we may, it doesn't lend itself to a quick fix. It doesn't lend itself to the question of, do we go back to the office next week, next month? So I think one of the important bits for me through, as we begin to reimagine in Sovereign, what our business will look like and how we shape it and how we engage with our customers, our employees, is to take those bits into account and actually think about it a bit more systematically. Think about how we design roles, think about how we engage with our employees to help them express how they're feeling through this process and how they can be most productive through this process. Now, technology, as I say, I can't get through 10 minutes without talking about technology challenges. There's been some really interesting bits in Sovereign through the last 4 months. So we've introduced some dashboards that has allowed us as an exec to make kind of daily decisions on real data. So be that employee data, be that customer data, how we're performing through that time. So whereas we may have got into a sort of cycle of looking back at last month's performance, that wasn't good enough during this period. So we have been able to sort of turn around data through the use of dashboards to be able to make real-time information. We did roll out Teams very quickly during that period, whereas normally we probably would have tested it and probably would have piloted it and probably would have gone through a whole cycle of test and learn phases and then maybe got brave enough to release it. Now, clearly that wasn't going to wash through this period. So we can, I think, take heart and inspiration from the fact that just throwing some stuff out there and giving it a go actually makes a difference, and actually in this case has landed, and people have been receptive to it, and we need to continue to do that. You know, I think if we understand how to make teams productive, for instance, we were talking recently about how our schedulers operate, and you know, our schedulers are used to being able to look around and look around at their colleagues and take advice and take guidance from people and come up with a schedule on the back of that, and not being able to do that has been a real impediment. Now we've got to get over that. We've got to find ways through that, and technology can play a role in doing that. But we need to understand the business imperative. We need to understand what kind of flexibility we want to provide for our people and what our people want from us, and then build solutions around them. And I think that presents a huge opportunity and yeah, exciting times for me.
Thank you. That's great, Kevin. Really great start to our conversation. I've got a question from Helen Ives at TAF Housing, who's asking, has anything been lost by implementing Microsoft Teams so quickly?
I'm glad I'm answering this and not my chief exec, who I think is out there. No, so I think it was very successful. What we're actually finding interestingly now, as we start to get back into the more traditional corporate environment, is that some of the sort of stresses on our network is actually coming to the fore, where people using it at home, that those stresses were distributed across our network. So interestingly, some of the stuff is now coming up sort of 4 months later. I think the other thing is, you know, not all of it is being used. I think the kind of instantaneous team sessions are good. I think some of the collaboration material that sits behind Teams isn't exploited as much as it could be. But hey ho, you know, who's to say that it all needs to work 100% on day one? I think the fact that it's now embedded and it's the thing that people click on first thing in the morning means that you can build on that and develop it over time. Whereas I think we probably were slightly scared that you know, it would get a bit of a bad rap, and then people would find other ways of communicating. That definitely hasn't happened.
Yeah, and another question for you, Kevin, from Jackie at Worthing Homes. Hello, Jackie. Jackie's question is, what kind of employee information are you looking at on the dashboard?
So we tracked sort of general absence information, and we went through quite a rigorous sort of COVID tracking exercise, and we were able to understand who was shielding and what sort of stage they were through that process. But the more interesting stuff beyond that, the more sort of stuff that changed on a more regular basis, was some of the mental health and well-being information. So we were doing regular pulse surveys, so understanding how people were feeling through that, supplemented by the workplace analytics stuff that Microsoft provides. So being able to sort of anonymously look at diary intensity, where the breaks are falling. We were able to look at when people were logging in and logging off, and seeing that the extended hours during the day, and we were able to sort of draw inference from that as to how our people, so adding those things together on a single dashboard, how our people were feeling, and where extra support was required. Really, really useful stuff. I mean, a lot of this becomes kind of anecdotal if it isn't backed up with quite good statistics, statistics alone don't tell the story, but they do provide an interesting backdrop, particularly when they're changing week on week.
And a question from me, Kevin. So at Campbell Tickell, we've been supporting our clients with lots of senior recruitment over the lockdown period. What kind of lessons are Sovereign learning from the recent recruitments that you've done, perhaps in kind of more junior or frontline roles?
Yeah, so that's a really live question for us. So, I mean, we're looking at the moment around retention rates, where they were, we have suffered some retention issues on people recruited early on in lockdown. And I guess the thing we're looking at a bit is around sort of practical. Normally you would run practicals on some of those front lines. We haven't been able to run those practicals, so occasionally that triggers, you know, a mismatch, I think, in terms of being able to assess skills, and then obviously as you move into role, then that becomes more apparent. But I think really interesting that topic as we go forward. I think, you know, I've gone through 2 senior recruitment processes for my direct reports through this process, and they've been really good, they've been really efficient, they've been quick, they've generated good candidates. It will be interesting to look at that as it runs through in 6 months' time, to understand some of the trends and some of how people felt through that process, and how they land, and how we induct and make them successful employees within our business.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Lots of questions flying in, so we'll make sure we leave a bit of time at the end to come back to those. But I'm going to move us on to our next speaker, Tracey. And Tracey Lees at Wandle needs to know where you got your musical instrument from. Maybe you can answer that before you get going.
There we go. I think if you look on Amazon, and it's like they're called prayer bells or something like that. They're beautiful there. I've got another one. So the other thing you can listen to is a sound bowl, and that's equally lovely. So yeah, just bringing people into that. So I use both of those things to bring people into meetings, which is a little bit different approach, but that's all about changing space, changing mindset from being in the same location all day and having to shift how we're thinking. So I use those things. So on to leadership and imagining the future. And I think I mean, the thing that comes out more than anything, it's true now, it's true today, it's true yesterday, but it'll be even more true in the future when we've got people working from multiple locations and people being flexible working, is trust. So if I had to give one sort of piece of advice, it's about building trust within your organisation. And a really, really simple test of trust for me is if your CE or any of your directors can jump on a Zoom call or get in a lift with someone from anyone in the organisation and they feel very comfortable sharing their ideas with you. So it's building that trust that is absolutely key when you've got different ways of working and people in different places. So the other thing I want to talk about is leadership itself. And so imagine in the future, I think at the moment we've got this perception, leadership is a badge. You're doing your job, you get made up to lead a team and you become a leader. Well, leadership isn't a badge, it's a way of being. And I think we have to shift from thinking we have some leaders to everyone is a leader within the organisation. Anyone that has any responsibility, which should be everyone, is a leader. And so if we change that mindset and that you know that every time you're engaging with somebody, it's from that position, who are you as leader? Who are you, how do you show up as leader every day within your organisation, whether you're working from home or in a head office. So I think that has to be the major shift. And that's what I notice when I'm training people. It's such an eye-opener when you say, no, you are a leader, just by being and having a set of responsibility. And I think that's really key. So from there, I think the other things I want to share with you, I'm just going to have a drink of water. The other things I want to share with you are how we motivate. And what I'm picking up is that where people are working away from a central office, there are things that are playing out around slight disconnect, of course, no surprise. So I want to introduce you to a model. It's Dan Pink model. It comes from the book Drive, and it's all about motivation. But there are lots of models of motivation, but this is really, really simple. And he says to motivate, we need three things. We need mastery, we need autonomy, and we need purpose. Mastery. If people aren't in the office and they can't ask, it's even more important they feel confident in what they're doing. Make sure that everybody is really able to do the tasks you're giving them. Align your talent to task. And really, that's the shift. If you shift that everyone's a leader, then everyone has their own responsibility to say where they have mastery and where they don't, and what help they need. So mastery is key when you've got people working away from the office. Autonomy is absolutely key. Autonomy is framework, is structure, is the person working, no matter where they are, knows what their area of responsibilities are, and they know what decisions they have to make and where their area of responsibility is for decision making. You want the decisions to be made at the point of the information, and autonomy is key in that. So in order to have that, you need to have good people managers. You need to have people that aren't controlling everything. So there's a two-way thing, but autonomy is really key, and it's so motivating. And when I'm doing leadership programs, people talk about having autonomy and that empowering them, and it's so crucial. And the last part, the last element is purpose. And so this is another thing that's coming through. You know, we do vision, we do purpose, our whys and our values, and we sort of do them and park them, and then we get on with the day job. And that can work if you're in one building. But as soon as you spread people out, you need to be singing all together about your vision, your values, and your purpose. And my sort of litmus test on this is, if you get invited to a meeting and you don't know why you're there, you shouldn't be there. You should challenge. So that's a bit challenging. I do this in my leadership and everyone goes, oh, that's so brilliant. But make sure you know why you're at the meeting. What's your purpose there? And why does somebody want you there? And I think that's absolutely fine to say, you know, happy to come to the meeting. Just tell me what you need from me and what you're looking for from me. before I come to this meeting. So that's just a little test of purpose. But purpose runs right through. It's the golden thread. And we need to be talking about it all the time, because definitely I'm getting this feeling of fragmentation and not really clear on vision when people are away from the office. So we need to be bringing it into the conversation, and it needs to be hearts and minds. And that's the same with values. So I think that's another important thing. And these are all quite simple things that we can bring into our day-to-day. So the last area I'm going to talk about is transactional analysis and Eric Berne's model. And he says for every human to thrive, they need three things. They need structure, they need stimulation, and they need strokes. So we talk about structure, we have that in place, and that we have that with governance, we have that with the autonomy piece, if I know where my boundaries are. Stimulation, that's really about mastery, making sure your people are growing every day and there is a stretch to be had in their roles. And then the last bit, the strokes. So this is really fundamentally important, I think, at this moment in time. And Kevin's already talked about water cooler conversations. So there are strokes are units of recognition. So a really small stroke could be, I get on the tube and someone smiles at me. And that I'm recognised as a fellow human being, it's a stroke. But I go to the water cooler and someone says, oh, hi Tracey, how was your weekend? And that's a really big stroke. It's an unconditional stroke. It's just seeing me for who I am as a person. So here I go. I go into my meeting with my manager and I say, I've done this task. And my manager says to me, oh, that's brilliant, Tracey. You've done such a brilliant job. That is a conditional stroke. So it's still a stroke, but it's conditional. So I'm valued for what I do. So here's another scenario. I come into the meeting, same scenario, sorry, and I say I've done this task. And my manager says, oh, put that aside for 5 minutes. We'll look at that. Just tell me how you are. How's this week been for you? That's an unconditional stroke. And if we learn to do unconditional and conditional strokes, and we're mindful of that needing for connection, we are able to separate person from task. And I think that's really critical, separating the person from the task. And Eric Berne would say that all people are okay, it's behavior that's bad or good. But people are fundamentally okay. And I think that thinking about strokes will help you build that connection with your people and build those, unconditional strokes. So summary is trust, 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 build the trust. Shift your mindset, everybody is a leader, and then facilitate that from training your people managers in people management. And then the mastery, autonomy and purpose, make sure that vision is living and breathing. And then finally, from the transactional analysis, really keep strokes to front of mind. And then you can manage people wherever they are.
Thank you so much, Tracey. Some really different thinking there. I've got one practical question from Julie. Julie Scott at Cairn Housing, and I know that you know the answer to this because you and I talked about it last week. What do you do in terms of facilitating sessions when you haven't got access to the flip chart and the post-it notes and you're all in one room?
Oh, I didn't really get that. What do I do when you're...
So you're facilitating a session, but you're not all in one room. You haven't got the luxury of a flip chart stand and the post-it notes. How do you generate that kind of free thinking that you sometimes kind of need to do?
Yeah, so I use Teams and Zoom, and I use breakout rooms. I get people to draw, I get people to do play, so different exercises. So a beautiful exercise from improv is yes and. And just in a group, you throw in an idea, you say, are we going to the beach tomorrow? And someone else says, yes, and we're taking all our friends. And the next person says, yes, and we're going to have the best food in the world. Yes, and it's going to be a beautiful sunny day. Yes, and Beyonce's going to sing for us. So you play with yes and it's a classic improv game around driving innovation. So you change the state that people are in, you move into play mode. And the other thing I do is get people to draw. So I could ask, if we were all visible here, the four of us are, draw how you feel today. Or draw how you'd like the team to behave today. And so we start using play and a little bit of a shift to bring some energy in the virtual world.
Gail afternoon, Gail, at Broadacres has raised a couple of really interesting questions. There's one in particular, Tracey, for you, which is around, do you think we'll be looking for different skills now, maybe particularly in our managers, our leaders of people, than we were before the pandemic, before the lockdown?
I think I'm not sure if we're looking for different skills. I think we need to learn to articulate them differently, if that makes sense. It's a shift in perception rather than a shift in talent. And so I think we definitely need more confident. You definitely need to have confident people that allow their people space. So anyone now working with a manager that's a little bit neurotic and we all have neuroticism in us, but if you're slightly neurotic or a bit, and you want control of everything, you're going to have a meltdown. So you need that skills in able to manage people, I think, and build the confidence in that. But what I tend to do is, people already have them. I just help them see them in a better way, using a different lens.
Yeah. Susan from Barnsley Housing, Susan French, good afternoon. She's got a really great question. How do you bring quieter team members or reticent team members into the conversation when you're in Teams or in Zoom?
So I tend to do contracting up front, and I would tend to be saying that this is, joint session, and that I would like everybody to speak, and it's really everybody's voice is important. So what I will be doing is inviting people to speak. And is everybody okay with that?
So you're giving upfront information about your expectations.
Yeah. And contract with the group. And also you can contract with the group and say, look, how are we going to manage? We know we've got different people. How do we manage as a group?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you so much, Tracey. Really interesting stuff. Equally interesting, I'm sure. We're now going to hear from Yvonne. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So I've been asked to share the journey, really, of what we're doing towards what we call a lifestyle contract. And so a little bit, obviously, we were driven by COVID. 19th of March, like many other people, we closed the offices. We got everybody working from home, like many other people in the room did, and also like many of the people in the room, we didn't think we would, and so especially for our customer hub and our Astroline 24/7 life critical service, but we did. So that said a lot to us, and then if I take you through our sort of thought process, our decision-making process, we did immediately impact assessment related work and some surveys, and we've kept on with the surveys quite a lot. So what's the impact of the homeschooling? What's the impact of looking after your parents? What about volunteering? Because, very, very early on, there was lots of requests for volunteering, wasn't there, from all sorts of places, and a big desire to support people in the community. So what was that looking like for our colleagues? What about partners at home, where their other partner was working from home as they were? What's the impact of that? What's the impact of partners being on shifts? And what's the impact of space? Some have space, some don't have space, some are using kitchen tables. You're on the Teams calls and you can see couches and the edge of kitchens, you can see bedrooms, you can see all those sorts of things, can't you? The good and the bad, really, for people. And so our view was, really, at that time, we just said the message was, do what you can, work as flexibly as you need, and a clear message of trust. So it's good that Tracey's talked about trust. So we said fairly early on, we trust you, we'll pay you, we weren't going to furlough, and we wanted to make sure that gave colleagues their family stability. And the way that we work, allowed us to do that. Obviously, everybody's got different circumstances about their own workforce and structure of how they deliver services. But for us, that was fine, that would work. we had an interesting exec session on the 16th of April, actually, so about a month in. We already have a quarterly exec strategy day off-site every quarter, but almost a month in, you know, you'll remember we were in the thick of it, and we were using Teams, so it was our first strategy day in Teams. We had a facilitator, so we're a member of the Disruptive Innovation Network, so we had Ian come and do some facilitation. It was a great time for reflection and a little bit of time out, because, you know, when you were in the thick of it, it was just relentless, wasn't it? And you'd make a decision in the morning and then something had changed from the government and you'd be, you know, looking at what that meant in the afternoon. But at the session, we talked about learning, we talked about the future. We talked about our own leadership styles as well, which was a really good reflection. And our view was, at that time, in a month in, it was a golden opportunity not to be missed, but actually fast track some of the intentions that we had previously, refine them, make them even more relevant for today and what we imagined the future might look like. And interestingly, we'd only just signed off our Vision 2025 with the board. We'd worked on it from January, signed it off in March, and here we were thinking, do you know what, actually, our corporate priorities for the year could be very different. And what we agreed is, coming out of COVID and imagining the world post-COVID had to be a bottom-up approach. We felt very strongly about that. Our colleagues needed to design their future. And so that was the birth of what we called My Futures Group. On the 5th of May, we took some updates to board, telling them about our thoughts for the future. They were happy with the principle of the My Futures Group and the remit that we'd set. On the 20th of May, My Futures Group was launched. 29th of May, we went back to the board. So we felt it was really important to keep engaging with the board, sharing our thoughts as it was a moving feast and getting their buy-in. And on the 16th of July, we had a full strategy session with our board about our service offer to residents, where we worked and how we work. And the rest of what I'm going to talk about is the how we work and the lifestyle approach. So the My Futures Group, quite a big group, and there was 15 in it, but we felt it was essential that we had a diverse range of colleagues, some new people that had joined us, some people that have been with us a while, some of the younger age, some of the older age, lots of different areas, whether they worked in the regions that we work in, because we're pretty spread in the north, or whether they were part of the corporate services family. So really, really diverse. It was led by a brand new member of the exec team. So interesting, when Kevin's recruited, we have two. That's been absolutely fascinating. And our new gentleman, Steve, is our Director of Data and Digital Transformation. And he led the group, so there's no baggage. You know, he didn't know a lot about Johnnie Johnson. We had a complete mix of people, and we were running some surveys. It was important that in April, so fairly early on, we did a survey and we said to people, if you think you can't work from home until towards the end of July, what do you think about that? And 96% of people said they were happy working from home. So that was an unbelievable stat. So we felt really comfortable, actually. And what we were looking at, and I'll share the screen in a sec, just show you very quickly what we've drafted up. We've always said business needs come first, but when we're talking about a lifestyle, I know that Aileen from the CIH said there's no such thing as work-life balance because it is all about life. And I really believe that. And these were the types of questions we were asking our colleagues about their life and how do they fit the two together. But this is really what we sort of set out around a lifestyle contract approach to work. So you've got things here about, you know, I have done the school run, I've been out for a run. I've run some errands, or I've had an extra hour in bed. I've had an appointment for something that I needed to do. It might be over here, you meet somebody in a coffee shop, you meet your team for lunch, you have a project meeting. You might just catch up with colleagues that you haven't seen for a while. That's okay, because productivity is in a different style. It's about engaging and catching up and understanding the business, not just crunching numbers or figures or things on the other side of a keyboard. And what we also wanted people to think about in their lifestyle was our residents. And we have an ambition for our residents, for us to know our residents much better than we do now, and how we can do that. So lots of things around, let's build an innovation hub, let's make sure we keep the social events. And that's really where we said we think we will have this lifestyle approach. And so what we've done I think it's important just to share with you a culture journey that we've gone through. Because over the last couple of years, we've been working on what we've called an adult-to-adult culture and a trust-based culture. And one of our values is around empowering, and we've worked really hard on that. We've talked about what does that look and feel like. So at the point in time a couple of years ago, we were talking about simple policies. We were talking about check-ins. We were talking about skills for having difficult conversations. We were designing our leadership program. We were introducing coaching and integrating the values that we've got in everything we do. And I never forget, a person that we did some work with said, I heard it for the first time and it stuck with me, that Netflix's expenses of policy is do right by Netflix. And I think that is just fantastic. That's all it is, do right by Netflix. And so we've been working on that journey for a fair while. And as I say, I think that's been crucial to what we've been doing. So when we've set up a leaders group, a leaders program, we've got an operational leaders group, which are our heads. We've got a My Aspirations program, which are our rising stars. All our heads and our exec have coaches and mentors, depending on what it is that they need. And I've also done a fair few coaching sessions with some of our colleagues online as a joint, almost a podcast, and then some individuals. So I think, to be honest, that what made us realise that this would work and could work, and hopefully will work, is that we've been building to this point without even realising it in some areas for a couple of years. One of the things that somebody asked me about was, well, that might be right for your current colleagues, but what about new people that are going to come and join Johnnie Johnson? So we thought we'd do a survey. Actually, it just said, what would most attract you to come and work for Johnnie Johnson? And interestingly, 48% of people said working from home and flexible hours. So that was a really good surprise. The next one was 30% of people said reputation. And we're really keen on our brand. We do a lot of work on our brand and try to build our reputation. So that was interesting. Salary and benefits came out at 18%. And location and modern workspaces, which is fascinating because we are doing that too, just came out at 4%. So that working from home and flexible hours, again, it gives us some confidence knowing that it's an attractive offer for people of the future that want to come and join us. So really quickly, on a what next is, we've got the pictorial approach, but we're working up some more detail around that, answering lots of questions that people quite rightly have, because it's about individual conversations. What are their own personal circumstances? So we're doing some roadshows. We've got some individual conversations starting at the moment. We've got some things that we need to sort, which are linked to HMRC and the legals about contracts and bases of work, and what does that mean for expenses, and some financial modelling. So those are the practical things that go alongside the ambition, really. And we're working with our Norms and Rems committee, and next version going to our Norms and Rems at the beginning of September, and our board by the end of September. So that's really where we're at. That's our journey around lifestyle.
Thank you, Yvonne. A really interesting example of how creative you can be when you do that genuine thing about sort of building from the ground upwards. I'd like to put a question to you that's from Gail at Broadacres, and I think this might be relevant to lots of housing providers. So I'm paraphrasing Gail's question here, but Gail is asking, given that actually we've probably all got workforces where maybe lots of our people were already home working or had to work remotely, and thinking particularly about sort of property management, are we in danger of sort of only designing things through the lens of people that once used to work in offices and now may no longer do so?
Yeah, and I think, hiya Gail, I hope you well. I know you've been working hard with your property team. I think, again, every organisation is different, isn't it? And I know, Gail, you've got your big property team. Ours are contracted, but we do have 60% of our colleagues are in the neighbourhoods team and are very used to working flexibly, in location flexibly. So I think this is different to working out of different places. It's certainly around when can I work. So in some of the FAQs that we've had, people have been saying, you know, can I work on a weekend because my partner works on a weekend but has Tuesday off? So could I shift my working week? Well, number one thing is, it's got to fit the business needs and our resident needs, and that's a clear message that's gone out. But if it does, then why not? And what we've said is, from the empowerment perspective, that leaders with their teams will have these individual conversations and will work that through. And so other people, again, a bit like me, morning person, much better in the morning than I am later on. You know, if people want to, because they're up and about at 6 or 7 and it suits the business needs, then why not? If they want to knock off after lunch or go and pick the children up from school and then clock on later on, or whatever that looks like, as long as business needs are working, as long as leaders are happy with what their team members are doing, and as long as everybody is aware of what's happening and when people are in, when people are out, then that is how we're going to trial and work it. But it may not suit everybody, but let's give it a go.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. And that goes really well, doesn't it, with the thing that Tracey said to us earlier about trust. There's questions flying in thick and fast, so let's see if we can get through some of these. I'm going to ask panel colleagues to be very brief in their responses. Kevin, I'm going to come to you first. It's a question that's come from Claire Howe at B3 Living, and she's asking about how you kind of get a sense of the appetite for working from home, and how you might work towards a hybrid system so people have some flexibility about how they deliver during the working week.
I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, there's some interesting transitional states that I think we need to get our head around, as you know, a lot of businesses have moved, and I'm not talking specifically housing, excuse me if it does sound a bit office centric, but we've moved office to home, and then as people spend more time back in the office, we've developed ways of working that sort of suit one or the other. And you know, anyone who's spent an extended period of time in front of Teams will look at their day and see hours set aside for specific meetings, and your ability to grab 5 minutes to get stuff done is really tricky. Now, if you spend a day back in the office and then find yourself 95% of the other people are still working predominantly in that mindset, it's really, really hard to get stuff done. So we need to understand those transitional states. For me, we need to be sensitive of them, and we need to, I guess, going back to my opening piece, it's lifting ourselves up and finding new ways of working that work for more and more people, and that includes different tools and different techniques. That may mean that you spend a day a month together as a team. That may get over some of the business imperatives. It may get over some of the sort of social isolation imperatives. I don't think there's a quick and easy answer to that, but I think much as Yvonne says, much as Tracey said, I think understanding the business imperatives, the personal challenges, thinking about how that lays out on teams, and coming up with solutions, a range of solutions, a menu of solutions that people can adopt and adapt as they see fit.
Thank you. My next question is for Tracey. This comes from Paul Smith, who's a board member at Connexus. Hello, Paul. And Paul is asking a question, and I think other people are also asking questions around this. So whilst doing things in Teams and Zoom is great for when you want to get the business done, and actually people are finding that meetings have been really effective, what about that more sort of creative space that you need in? What about strategic thinking? What are your top tips for how we might achieve some of that whilst we're still working in these formats?
I think, I think creating a separate space, so having a meeting that's specifically around creative thinking, so you can enter into play and that open mindset. So I think that's quite important. It's really hard to switch in the same space from the doing and the task focus into right now we're going to think creatively. So I would encourage people to set up separate meetings that are really free thinking. I would definitely, it's different time scales. So if you want to be creative, you need to set a time box time that you say we're going to come together for an hour and we're just going to be as wild as we can and come up with this, blue sky thinking. We're just going to blue sky for an hour. Then we capture that and then we go away for a week and we come back and we go, right, from that blue sky, what's sat with us? What news come up? So build in space from thinking blue sky, let this unconscious and procrastinate on those ideas and come back together. So build in some space in between blue sky thinking to actually bringing in the ideas. The other thing I'd say that everyone can do is walk-in meetings. So split your board into 2 or 3 people or a team of 4 and say, look, you're going to be 2 pairs and next week you just do a walk-in meeting and you're on your phone and you talk about a problem and you think about it creatively while you're moving. And then the 2 people come together, 2 teams, and you make a 4 and you come up with the best idea that the two had into 4 and 1 idea. So you start breaking it down a bit, and movement and doing walking meetings help with that creative thinking because you're bringing a different space in. So there's simple ideas. The other thing is to bring someone in like me.
Nice. Another quick question for Tracey, and I've got something for Yvonne. Tracey, your next question comes from Paddy Gray at Glasgow Housing. Hello, Paddy. I think this is a great observation. What do you do about people who are in Zoom and team meetings and they're clearly not concentrating on the conversation? They're fiddling around with their phones, they're writing some other kind of report, they're looking at their emails, and they think that we don't know that, but we do. What's your kind of advice on dealing with that?
Contracting. Just right up front in your meeting, say, okay, what behaviours are we going to accept as a team? How do we get the best out of the hour? How do we need to behave? And you contract with the team and get the team to say.
Good stuff. Thank you. Yvonne, a question for you from Eamon, our friend at NFA. So Eamon is picking up on the points that Gail raised about staff who can't work from home, so repair operatives or caretakers or surveyors. And Eamon is asking about how have those staff in your organisation taken to the lifestyle contract? Have they seen it as inclusive and beneficial for them, or has it been divisive?
Yeah, so as I said, Eamon, thank you for that. we found that 96% of people said that they could work from home. So we did that early on. We really wanted to know, and alongside the impact assessments of all these other things that were going off, as I say, homeschooling, etc. For that 4% though, it's been really key to have one-to-one conversations. Some of it's been about space. And so we've helped people out with various bits and bats of furniture that allow them to have a much better position at work. For some, what we've got at the moment is a small temporary space. Not in our head office. We haven't opened up head office. I know quite a few of you know that we're looking to build homes on that, but we've got some temporary space. And that's been tested predominantly. People that had difficulties aiming were some of our brand new starters in Astraline, our life critical service. There's a really intense training program. It takes about 8 weeks to be able to be confident and competent in picking up those types of life-saving calls. And so they were the ones that were struggling at the moment. So we've got some temporary space that a few people are using. And as I say, for the longer term, through the one-to-one conversations, that's what we've been having. So we have got space, people can go. It's all very COVID safe. It's just not our existing head office.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. We're almost at the end. Hopefully time for just a couple more questions. I'm going to take one from Barrington Billings. Hello, Barrington. Kevin, this one is for you. Barrington's asking about the use of speech recognition technology. And, you know, we've got Siri, we've got Alexa, maybe people are kind of very used to using those things at home, perhaps less so in the workplace, in our sector. What's your view on kind of embracing that type of technology?
Let's go back to the first question today. You know, the 10 years versus 1 year thing. If you take the shift that we've seen in the last 10 years, in 10 years' time, I think, you know, the keyboard will be very much a secondary way of inputting information and extracting information. It's one of those things that, you know, you may not think is moving that quickly, because as years go by, you will see a sort of documentary on it, and then a year's gone by and it hasn't taken effect. In 10 years' time, it will be ubiquitous. So again, I'll use my children's example. They will pull up Netflix using voice, they'll pull up Amazon using voice, they'll search using voice. You know, it's second nature to them. The thought of using keyboards or even touch pads on phones to do that stuff just won't apply. So as that becomes, I don't think it's a matter of that getting better, because it's adequate for 95% of the things that people want to do at the moment. So as it just becomes a tipping point where people feel comfortable doing it, I would say 18 months to 2 years, it will be, you know, a predominant way of accessing and extracting information. So unless we get our head around it, unless we build it into our core CX channels, then we will be seen as falling behind. It's critical.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Yvonne, a question for you. We've had a couple of questions that are talking about the practicalities of shifting towards home working or a hybrid model. So things around sort of HMRC and kind of your engagements with them. What kind of advice are you taking about how HMRC is likely to take these arrangements? And Paddy also had a question about insurance and how that covers people at home.
Yeah, so HMRC is a fascinating one. I saw that in the Q&A room. It did make me smile. I think the HMRC, and apologies if anybody's got any friends, family, or that relate to them, I think it's going to take them a while to catch up. So actually, the conversations we're having about what is a base, what does that mean? I'm very happy to have and arrange a conversation with you and your people team and our people team in much more detail if anybody wants to. But I think it's going to take them a while to catch up. The insurance one, yes, obviously we checked out with insurance. I'm sure everybody's done that on the call. People are insured, people's equipment are insured. But what we have said to people is, as a double check, you just want to check that out on your insurance as well. And I know one or two people are already looking about changes in tax code, which supports some benefits. It's very, very small by the look of it in relation to working from home. But yeah, probably ask me in about a month's time when we've maybe sorted that detail out.
Good stuff. We are out of time. Thank you all very much. I'm sorry that we didn't manage to get to all of the questions, but do take a look at the Campbell Tickell website and LinkedIn group, because I imagine some of this debate will continue there. That just leaves me to say a very, very big thank you to our three speakers, Tracey, Yvonne, Kevin. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's been really great, really interesting and stimulating, and nice to kind of see those pieces of the jigsaw sort of fitting together in terms of how the three of you kind of looked at this picture of reimagining work. Thanks also to Rihanna and Zena at CT, who have helped us with arrangements this afternoon. And thank you very much to our attendees. We've had a really great turnout. Nice to see, or metaphorically speaking, see some familiar faces. Good to hear from people. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks all very much.